Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation. And viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, from the Met Gala and Fashion Week to Fairbanks, Alaska, we speak with native model Quanah Chasing Horse.
And you may be experiencing these beautiful things, you're here representing so much more than just yourself.
And it's time to open up your maps and start talking to your neighbors. It's your last best chance to talk political redistricting. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. Change is in the air as we enter autumn, and our show this week is all about new things. The Citizens Redistricting Committee begins a huge push next week as it decides which maps to recommend to the legislature next month. The line will sort through some of the key points. Our opinion panel also talks about potential last-minute COVID protocols at Balloon Fiesta. Jeff Witte, the state agricultural secretary, talks about the future of agriculture in a changing climate. But we start with a big change that we've been giving some time to settle. That's the impact on New Mexico of the Texas abortion law. Here's the line. By now, we've all heard about the Texas abortion law that bans terminating a pregnancy after 6 weeks. It effectively deputizes the citizenry to enforce the ban through lawsuits and was crafted that way to, at least initially, avoid some constitutional questioning. Now, our question today is how it's impacting New Mexico and the clinics here that offer abortions. Here to offer thoughts are our Line Opinion panelists. Line regular and founder of the public relations business that bears his name, Tom Garrity, is back. Another regular UNM law professor, Serge Martinez, joins us once again, and it's been a while since Martha Burke has been here, but we welcome her back. The activist, author, and radio host to our table. Now, Martha, as you follow this law's implementation, what are the people you're talking to telling you about the on-the-ground effects so far? What are you hearing?
Well, it's causing a lot of hardship for women here in Mexico, as well as across our borders, because many women in Texas, there are very few clinics in southwest, southeast Texas. So they were depending on the clinic in El Paso. That is now gone. That means it's not accessible to southern New Mexico either. Southeastern New Mexico has no clinics that offer abortions. So women have to travel here to Albuquerque. Santa Fe doesn't have a clinic either. They're all in Albuquerque. And that's 200 or 300 miles, depending on what part of the state you live in down there. Many women can't take off work for 2 or 3 days to make arrangements for childcare. Buy the gas. Think about that. A lot of people don't have that extra $100 to buy gas to travel 300 miles. So it's going to be a hardship. I will have to say that I am very pleased that our Attorney General Balderas said he will defend any clinics here that happen to be attacked by these vigilantes, and that's what they are. He tried to bring suits against the clinics, although technically it only applies to Texas. You never know what these nutcases are going to do.
Martha, I got to say the numbers are kind of daunting. You would think there were 55,000 abortions in Texas in 2019, something like 3,800 here in New Mexico. I mean, just the sheer numbers. How are we supposed to absorb a third of that number? Just to pick a number. That's an extraordinary amount of women seeking services.
Well, it absolutely is, Gene. And even though many of them are not going to be able to travel, a number will. I read something recently, I guess yesterday, that the requests are up 64%.
Right.
One of our clinics here in Albuquerque, and that is all coming from Texas. So it's sort of hurting women coming and going. It's the women here in New Mexico are having a harder time accessing the state facilities and deal with the influx of women from Texas, those that can afford and have the wherewithal to get here. Balderas has also said, and I'm very gratified about this, that he will defend any clinics that are attacked legally on this. And I'll just have to throw in that Uber and Lyft are saying also that they will defend any of their employees that get sued over this. You know, you can, according to the Texas law, anybody can be sued
Right.
by anybody else, whether they live in Texas or not. If you're in New Mexico and you gave money to come in across the border, you could be sued here.
Let me talk to turn to Serge on that point. It's interesting. We've now seen 2 lawsuits, Serge, filed against that Texas doctor. You know, he said openly that he's violated the ban, and neither person who filed necessarily supports the law, which is interesting. But will this force that issue of constitutionality? I mean, do we need to just get to that point and get this on, so to speak?
I mean, that's the intent of both of these is to say, yes, this is going to be, this is what's going to set the chain and the dominoes in motion to get this to some sort of constitutional test. I'm not really sure. I mean, both of them have openly said that they're doing it, for reasons that are not consistent with the law. What that would mean to a court, I don't know, or whether the actual questions that need to be raised and addressed for constitutional review purposes are going to actually come out of these 2 cases. So I can't say for sure about these 2 cases. I don't know enough, but I mean, this is exactly what the Supreme Court, when they said we can't review this, our hands are tied because this is just so clever. We can't possibly look at this, which I don't know if you can tell. I'm not really on board with. I found their reasoning quite disingenuous. But that said, right, they're saying we need to have a very specific set of circumstances that are going to, force us to address this. And whether this will be that, I don't know. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I suspect we'll see lots more of this as this tries to play itself out.
That's right. Tom, the twist on this obviously is that the citizenry, is the entity that enforces this law. This is, unheard of in a lot of ways. What's the upside? What's the downside? How do you see this?
Well, it really comes down to, it's the power of elections and voting. These rules would not, be in play, whether, regardless of what your view is on this particular topic, if not for the elections. And, so what we're seeing is nationally is that states have been lining up over the last couple of years, anticipating a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on Roe versus Wade, as far as either readdressing the case or, perhaps even addressing a new case. New Mexico, I think 2 sessions ago, addressed, the abortion issue. Texas now is addressing the abortion issue, both in very different ways. Florida is reportedly looking at it. So, it's really comes down to, as I know we're also going to be talking about redistricting a little bit later today, about, the power of the vote is what it really comes down to.
Tom, I got to ask you this, though. It's doubtful whatever happens here in New Mexico as a result of this Texas law is going to change anyone's mind on abortion. So how have you seen policymakers responding to this, or will they? Maybe I should ask that as well.
Well, I think policymakers have responded,
Okay.
As far as with their vote, as far as, and I forgive me, I don't remember the exact law that was passed by the legislature, but the policymakers in the past have been very much influenced through the Catholic Church.
Right.
The Catholic Church has been very vocal in in its position on this particular issue, and a number of other groups have as well on both sides of the issue. So policymakers are definitely hearing from both sides, and unfortunately or fortunately, in this particular political environment that we're in right now, I don't think that there are many reasonable voices at this particular table, not our table, but as far as in this discussion when they're talking to the electeds.
Martha, we did have some movement this past. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but just want to point out we did have some movement on the abortion law, of course, here in New Mexico that got repealed. I'm interested in your point, the same point about policymakers. What's their next move on the chessboard here?
Well, I wanted to add a footnote about that
Please.
law, because at the time people were saying, oh, it's an old law, it doesn't matter. We have national policy as long as Roe lasts. Well, Roe may not last. Because as Tom says, it comes down to the electorate. There are over 25 other cases trying to make their way to the Supreme Court from various states to overturn Roe. So even if this Texas law is invalidated, the next one up is coming up in December out of Mississippi.
Right.
The goal has always been, even if abortion remains legal, you can't get one.
Right.
Because either the clinic doesn't exist or the waiting period, you can't afford to go somewhere and wait 24 hours and that sort of thing. So the pro-choice movement is being attacked coming and going, as I said.
Let me spin back real quick to something you mentioned earlier, Martha. That was Hector Balderas. He signed on to the DOJ lawsuit challenging that Texas law. Our Attorney General called it, quote, ridiculous, this law. And he has a legit worry, it seems, from some that it will create health problems, not just for Texans, but for New Mexicans. I got to ask you, what's the weight of him signing on to this, signed by 23 other states as well?
I think it's a huge weight. I think it is a very strong message from our Attorney General. And of course, we saw in the legislature when they overturned the old pre-Roe law, New Mexico stands for women. Now, that could change anytime, as Tom says, with the votes. We have redistricting coming up. We don't know what the state legislature will look like after that. But for right now, I admire the Attorney General's speaking out, his doing something about it to the extent that he can. And we just got to keep New Mexico pro-choice.
Good point there. Serge, real quick, we're a little short on time here, but let me widen the lens a little bit with the conservative Supreme Court. Conservative states, as Tom mentioned, crafting laws, anticipating or inviting even a legal challenge. Is that strategy, a process, judicial activism? I mean, how do we view this as a moment in time, this little era we're in here?
No, this is 100% judicial activism by inaction on this one, right? The process, there's a playbook here that just they chose not to follow it and let this law take effect. And effectively in Texas right now, Roe versus Wade is not the law of the land. And the Supreme Court gave its blessing to that, right? They are, the court has been going on a tour recently trying to say, we're not partisan hacks, but everything they are doing displays partisanship, and it's, the court is actively delegitimizing itself through the things that it's doing, calling it activism, or originalism, call it what you want. This is a court using, its conservative majority to reshape the law of the land.
All goes back to what Tom said, elections have consequences, right? We're out of time, but return in just a few minutes to talk redistricting.
Having those little reminders, and even my aunties texting me, letting me know that I'm not alone, even though it may feel lonely, that my ancestors are with me all the time, that our communities, our Indigenous communities are rooting for me, and that really kept me grounded the entire time I was there.
On Tuesday, the Citizen Redistricting Committee begins an 11-day, 8-meeting sweep around New Mexico to present and explain its newly released set of proposed maps for federal, state, and local political districts. You can access that full schedule and tune into live streams of those public hearings on our website, newmexicopbs.org. Now, Serge, let me start with you. Anything jump off the page to you in terms of any of those maps? I just want to ask a real broad question here because there's so many maps, so many things to get into, but was there one that really just kind of grabbed you?
Absolutely, Gene. I'm an Albuquerque resident, and when I saw the map that wanted to put Albuquerque and Santa Fe and cabin these two places into one single district, I was a little bit surprised. And I understand it's one of many, and the idea is urban, put as many urban areas as possible. But first of all, I was curious as to how that could actually work numbers wise. But second, I thought it was frankly shocking.
What's the concern? I'm curious. What's your concern with that particular proposal? This Uber CD1 that has just this narrow thing, but it's all urban, all packed with population.
Well, I was surprised more than anything, but when I unpack it a little bit, right, there's a lot more to this than just the definition of who is urban, who is not urban. And these redistricting is always contentious, but historically has been a question of trying to smash everybody possible, trying to put people who you might think think the same into one particular district to dilute the power of the people who think that way. But there are also other aspects of this, right? Especially in urban, suburban, or rural rather divides. There's often a racial aspect that I think we need to be aware of. And those sorts of things can get ugly when you think about how we're redistricting. And so I'm aware of that and very concerned about ways that we use urban or rural as a proxy for other statements and any other sort of labeling.
That's why we love having you on the show, man. You just get underneath it. I like that answer a bunch. Tom, the redistricting committee will gather that public input before coming up with a final list of proposed maps for the legislature to vote on. And those final maps will be released on October 15th. All right, we have a date certain on that. This is obviously a new process for us here in New Mexico. What do you think about it so far? Do you think it's taking politics and partisanship out of the process from what you've seen so far?
Well, I think it gets more voices at the table, which I think is a huge success, because when you look back 10 years ago, the public's input was really non-existent.
Thank you.
Now, because of the actions from the legislature, the outreach from the CRC, Citizen Redistricting Committee, you actually have the public has a chance to go and submit their own maps, which is really, it's light years in progress of getting the public involved. I think the maps that we've seen have been fascinating. There have been a lot of talks about vertical and horizontal maps for the congressional districts,
right?
And a lot of creative kind of, I won't call it gerrymandering because it's creative, districting right now, because they're just providing options. And we've seen it from a number of different communities of interest. So that I think is a big success. To answer your question though, Gene, to partisanship, hopefully when the maps move from the CRC to the legislature, our collective hope is, and I have my firm works in this particular arena, is that we would hope that whatever the CRC develops is endorsed and moved on and approved by the legislature to the governor. Because I think when you get the elected leaders involved in the process, that's when you have the opportunity for some of that gerrymandering to take place.
Good points there. Martha, the committee has gone out of its way to collect input from tribes, Pueblos, and Navajo Nation in this process. And that comes after complaints that there was no Native American representation on the committee. Remember that when it first got going. Have they done enough so far to allay those concerns in your view?
I think they've gone a long way, Gene. I don't know if it will totally allay the concerns.
Okay.
For those watching who have not seen the web extra you did with the committee members, they should watch it because the committee is going out of its way. As Tom said, people can draw their own district, see how that would look, and mess around with the maps, if you will, on their own. And the real question, again, as Tom has already alluded to, is what is the legislature going to do when they get the recommendation?
Right.
They can go for it. They can throw it out and say, we don't like this. We're going to do something different. I would like to bring up another point that has already fell through the cracks again, but it's very important, and that is the districts that house prisons. And the prisoners in the prisons get counted in those districts, whether they live there or not before they were incarcerated. They're now counted as part of that population.
Yes.
But the prisoners can't vote. So what is the net result? A smaller portion of the populace they've got a disproportionate share of the vote because their numbers were pumped up. Because of their prison populations. And I just want to read one that is totally outrageous. Santa Rosa is a host to the Guadalupe County Correctional Center. It has a total population of 2,850 incarcerated people. And 2,850 people. And incarcerated 585, that's over 20% of the population is incarcerated, but only 5 of those people in prison were actually from Santa Rosa.
Interesting.
So it gives you an idea of the distortion of the numbers that those folks, it's called prison gerrymandering. It hasn't.
It's been around a long time, and yeah, that's an interesting anecdote there. Serge, Martha mentioned I did that Facebook Live on Wednesday this week with Edward Chavez. He's the chairman of the committee, as well as Brian Sanderoff of Research and Polling, and Lily Vitella Irvin. She's the committee's community liaison working with all the tribes. Now, they said 1,200 people took part in this first round of public hearings. Nothing to shake your fist at, but how do we get more people involved at this really crucial stage of the process, which is right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think 1,200 does sound like a lot until you compare it to the number of people in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And I actually think their website and the little app they have, Districtor, I think it's called, that allows you to do your own. Like they should be sending that to every, putting that out on Facebook and Twitter. It's a fun little game. I had a great time playing around with it, and just alerting people through that sort of interactive way might be effective. I think there is no one more respected, I think, than Justice Chavez for even-handedness and ability to do this, and his desire to do this right. Mm-hmm. And I think they are really making a huge step by having all these meetings. But I do think, that they could amplify this, and I think through some non-traditional ways, and catch some folks who you might not think would be interested in the whole redistricting process through some of their really exciting uses of technology.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I got to go back to something in a circular way to something you mentioned earlier, but it's worth remembering the legislature changed the law that created the committee's scope of work, right? Originally, they would have made the final selection on how these maps are redrawn. Now they just make a recommendation, as you mentioned. But here's my question. Will this process, is it big enough? Is it, well known enough that lawmakers can't go off script, if you will? Does it create some kind of public pressure to not politicize the process, knowing that the public had a fairly firm hand in how this all came about?
Wow, elected leaders politicizing processes. Let's not let that sink in. There is always the opportunity, to either justify the CRC, which I think it's great because when you look at the 1,200 folks who have participated in the first round and the second round, everybody has something to comment at this time, is a lot better than zero, that goose egg that we had 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Hopefully the legislators, if they do make any adjustments, which I hope that they personally do not, because of that mandate from the CRC, I don't know. They might, but I would hope that
they might. But wouldn't that might include disrespecting a former Supreme Court judge? I mean, the reason Ed Chavez was chosen because he's an honest third broker here.
Yeah, Justice Chavez really needs to be applauded for all of his work. I mean, he and I worked together on the New Mexico First Redistricting Task Force, mm-hmm. and just the way he and Judge Kennedy both guided that process. They both earned my respect. And Justice Chavez, he is a voice of reason. He is a nonpartisan, person in this very partisan process. Mm-hmm. So, I hope that when the CRC delivers the maps, that the legislators will look at it in mid to late December and say, you know what, the public has spoken. We go ahead and accept these and move them on to the governor.
Good points there. Time to move on to other issues, but we will be talking about redistricting again very soon. And be sure to get caught up on the work so far at nmpbs.org.
You're going to see some higher prices for those commodities. You may see some increased imports of those items. People prefer the buy local. We all prefer the New Mexico products, especially New Mexico chili and onions and all the good things that we grow, but it makes it tough when you can't water it.
I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Quanah Rose Chasing Horse Potts is making waves in the fashion world. The 19-year-old model recently made a splash at New York Fashion Week, walking the runway for well-known designers. She also surfaced at the Met Gala decked out in Native American turquoise and silver jewelry. She's been featured in a number of magazines and is not only a rising model, she's a native rights advocate who fights for the protection of the environment and native ways of life. I caught up with Quanah this week after her whirlwind time in New York. Quanah, welcome to New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you for having me.
What was your experience like at New York Fashion Week?
It was overwhelming. It was a lot, very, a lot of energy, very chaotic, but I had a lot of fun. Overall, I'd never had one single bad experiences. Um, you know, Being welcome into those spaces is not common for Indigenous people yet. And the more we're starting to see Native people, Indigenous people being welcomed into these spaces, it can feel very, like you feel like an outsider. You don't feel like you belong there. There were certain moments where I felt alone and like no one really understood me and what I stood for. But there are also really good moments where people would come up to me and remind me, like, you're here for a reason. You're representing your people so beautifully, and it's okay to feel very alone, but don't forget that there are people that support you and your ancestors are walking with you. So having those little reminders, and even my aunties texting me, letting me know that I'm not alone, even though it may feel lonely, that my ancestors are with me all the time, that our communities, our Indigenous communities are rooting for me. And that really kept me grounded the entire time I was there. So it was amazing. I had an overall great experience, very blessed to be able to, represent in that way during Fashion Week. And it was definitely like I'm still having a really hard time processing everything that had happened and everyone that I had met, all the things that I did. And it was truly an honor.
And what does it mean to be able to have a voice, bringing Indigenous representation to the fashion industry? What does that mean to you?
It means a lot to me. I still sometimes have a hard time finding the words to articulate it, but genuinely, like, walking into those spaces and like I was saying, feeling alone, but remembering that I'm representing my nation, my people, Indigenous people all over, that really kept me motivated. And I constantly told myself, like, even though you're here and you may be experiencing these beautiful things, you're here representing so much more than just yourself. And I always have to remind myself, like, I'm here not only to, make myself, look better or have, my career shoot up in that way. But genuinely, for me, it has nothing to do with myself. Like, I take pride in who I am and where I come from. And that's what is, the main reason why I've started doing anything in the first place, is just having that pride and staying grounded and believing that no matter where I walked in this world, that I had something with me, that I could bring something to the table, that I can educate people on our people's issues, our what we face on a day-to-day basis. And it's very powerful knowing that people are starting to recognize our beauty in not just fashion, but the way we carry ourselves and how we protect the land, we protect the waters, how it's not about us as people, it's about the nation, the entire collective as a whole. So, yeah.
And sometimes the fashion industry is criticized for appropriating, Native culture, Native design, Native traditions, but being an Indigenous person and being able to have a voice and being able to show a true representation, how is that going to make a difference for you?
So how I really started modeling and all of this was, I started using my voice and my platform to raise awareness for many different things. Overall Indigenous sovereignty. I had done a lot of work with our communities here in Alaska, protecting the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, spreading awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and so on. Having those that kept me grounded and reminding myself that, I am not trying to be a sellout. I don't want to use, the word like, oh, a Native model and just use it for my own, look or whatever it is. I wanted to be able to bring not just myself, but what I stand for, what I represent to every space that I walk in the fashion world. And when it comes to appropriation, you know, when I walk into these spaces and they're trying to put something like very appropriated, like clothing or whatever, they're trying to put something on me and I don't feel comfortable because it's not, you know, made by an Indigenous person, or this designer didn't collaborate with an Indigenous person, that these designs were stolen and used to, you know, profit them. I tell the stylist, like, I'm not really comfortable with this. I just, like, it feels like it's appropriating my culture and my people. And if this was made or collaborated with an Indigenous person, I wouldn't have an issue. And I haven't had a single problem with it. They completely respect it, which is very nice for me to know, because the first time I had to say something about it, I was very nervous. Like, I didn't think that they would respect that. I thought that they would, you know, tell me, oh, you have to though, like, you know, you have to wear this. This is for this shot or whatever it is. But my favorite part about Fashion Week was walking for Gabriella Hearst. She partnered with Naomi Glasses and her family and the Navajo Nation to create this beautiful line and different pieces in her collection. And she also partnered with other Indigenous people from other regions to create these beautiful clothing. And she went out of her way to find Native models. She told the casting director, and the casting director herself was like really wanting to show that representation and have as many Indigenous people there, because if she was collaborating with Indigenous people, she wanted to represent that in the best way possible. She wanted to embody that. And so I think I, you know, walked into that space feeling confident and not alone. Like, that was the first time I didn't feel alone, seeing other Indigenous models there and like connecting with them and like laughing with them and, you know, talking about how similar our features are, because, you know, we all had like the native nose and whatever it was. Walking into that space and not feeling so alone was so beautiful. And being able to bring that and also connect on that level is very special, because I think that was the first time in fashion history that was done, having more than one Native model and collaborating with Native designers to create a beautiful line and represent it and embody it in that way. So I think it's extremely important that instead of appropriating, just reach out to other Indigenous people and artists and designers and collaborate with them, not steal their designs, our sacred designs. And whatever it is, it's extremely important. And I feel very blessed to be a part of it.
And there are a lot of different Native fashion designers across the country, and there are many Native fashion shows, including at the Santa Fe Indian Market. There's a lot of different events that showcase fashion. Are these types of events, you know, getting more attention, or do you think they're still, you know, a close secret?
I think they're getting more attention. I walked into Fashion Week and someone mentioned the Santa Fe, you know, that whole beautiful space. Like, they were asking me so much questions about it, and I unfortunately wasn't able to make it, and I wanted to so bad. But I think they are really starting to get out there more. And every time that I'm able to bring up a Native designer or talk about our own fashion, I include that as much as possible. And I always say there's so many beautiful designs by Native designers, artists. There's so many beautiful lines being created that is genuine, that isn't stolen, that isn't marketed to, you know, hurt anyone. And I think, you know, being able to share that with people in the fashion world at that level is extremely important, and it brings me so much pride and joy, because people are like, wow, I had no idea. And then they go home thinking about it, and like they go home and they're like, I learned something new today, I'm gonna look it up. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me after a shoot or after whatever I got done working on. They text me later on and they're like, hey, I really appreciate everything that you had to say. I had no idea. I went home and did my own research, and I will continue to follow and share as much as possible. And that's what truly brings me joy, is being able to make that change there.
And you had mentioned your work as a Native advocate and also a protector, being Hankwichin and also Lakota. What is your message to these different issues that you bring to the table?
There's so many different, I feel like, messages I can bring, but overall, when I'm in these spaces and when I talk about my work, I have done a lot. I went to DC and I lobbied and I met AOC and talked with congressmen and women on protecting our sacred lands and what that means, not just for us as Indigenous people, but for the world as a whole. I always include that Indigenous people protect 80% of the world's biodiversity, and that that's an extremely important thing because not a lot of people know that. And I think that the more people know about how much we do as a community, then they realize, like, wow, these people are really going out of their way and putting themselves on the line to protect what's left and what's precious to us, what's sacred to us. And that's extremely beautiful and important. But I feel like people are so drawn to the fact that I had made it to the Met Gala, that I have been in Fashion Week. And, anytime I have any kind of speaking engagement or a chance to talk about where I come from, who I am, what I stand for, I go out of my way as much as possible to bring up how important that work is to me, because it's the main reason why I started modeling in the first place. I was doing a lot of that advocacy work and people started recognizing that. And because of that recognition, I am where I'm at today, and I want to continue that, and I want to bring that everywhere I go because it's extremely important. And I feel like I carry so much traditional knowledge that from, being passed down from my grandma to my mom to me and my ancestors before that. It's extremely important to share with the world that we have that we have so much teachings and practices that keep us strong in many different ways, and our connections to the land is extremely important.
And where can we find you next? What's up next for you?
I am headed off to Paris soon, so that's what's next. We'll see what comes out of that, but Paris Fashion Week.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on New Mexico PBS.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it. It's an honor. Thank you for wanting to speak with me, and I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
It's been another tough year for New Mexico's farmers and ranchers, and we know things won't get easier in the coming years as temperatures keep climbing and the state's water supplies tighten. This week, environment reporter Laura Paskus checks in with Jeff Whitty, the state's agricultural secretary, on how farmers and ranchers are dealing with the challenges and what's to come in the future.
Secretary Whitty, thank you so much for joining me on New Mexico in Focus today.
Glad to be here, Laura. Thank you.
Drought is widespread. We also have communities where we've seen extreme precipitation events this summer. Can you give us a little overview of how the farming and ranching community is doing in New Mexico this summer?
This has been it's been an interesting year. We started out very, very dry. In our farming communities, most of them, like here in the southern end of the state, we were only allocated just a few inches of surface irrigation. And so a lot of the farmers had to rely on groundwater, a lot of pumping. If you drive around the southern part of Doña Ana County and northern part of Doña Ana County and even Sierra County, you're going to see a lot of fallowed land that just didn't have access to water this year. And that's really, that's attributable to the drought. The ranch land across the state, it started out very, very dry. As we went into June, it was really tough. And then all of a sudden these rains came. And now for the most part across the state, you see some good grass that's grown. It's amazing how the New Mexico landscape takes care of itself when we get a little rain. And it doesn't take a lot, just a little, but we've been blessed with some good rains. The northwest corner of the state is still dry, and we need to get some more rain up there. Our farmers and ranchers are very resilient. They plan for this year after year, although it was really getting tough. A lot of the ranchers that sold off a lot of their herds early on because they didn't have any choice. You don't have grass, you've got to buy hay, not economically viable. So we started off rough. It's looking a little better right now.
So I'm curious, when farmers have to fallow fields, when you miss a cutting or a crop harvest, how does that affect not just the individual farmer, but the economy as a whole, and then also maybe consumers?
So you see, and I'll talk a little bit about down in southern New Mexico where we had the fallowed land. A lot of that used to be onions or lettuce or chili, for instance. You're going to see less of that product on the table. New Mexico is number one in production of chili. New Mexico's number one in production of summer onions. We're like a salad bowl for a few months in this state. And so, you know, what that means is that we're having to bring it in from other places. You hope that Texas or California has a good production cycle, and that we have the consumer will have that available. But you're going to see some higher prices for those commodities. You may see some increased imports of those items. People prefer the buy local. We all prefer the New Mexico products, especially New Mexico chili and onions and all the good things that we grow. But it makes it tough when you can't water it.
I'm curious because we're also watching what's happening in the Colorado River Basin this year and the shortages. How does that either affect New Mexico markets or maybe preview what could be to come here in the next few years?
So it's kind of interesting. I've had a lot of conversations with my counterpart in California, Secretary Karen Ross, and even here, our farmers, they've learned how to adapt to the less water, and they increase their production per acre on fewer acres to offset some of that, but it doesn't offset all of it. New Mexico, we're kind of in a window between, a lot of times between Texas and California harvest cycles. If California is not harvesting, our farmers do really well price-wise. Same thing with Texas. The problem with the Colorado Basin and less water is that you're going to see less acres in California. And California is, you know, by far the number one producer of agricultural commodities. So it's going to have a ripple effect throughout the economy. Their farmers are going to have to really get good with efficiencies and irrigation schedules and even maybe looking at changing some of their cropping patterns. When you have field crops, say like their vegetable crops and things like that, you can change that. When you have tree crops, like what we have in southern New Mexico, pecans, they have almonds, you can't change those. And so you have to do all you can to protect those crops.
Is it realistic to think that we're going to be able to continue farming and ranching in New Mexico the way we always have? What choices do we need to make on our farms and ranches and as consumers as well?
I think absolutely we'll be able to continue farming and ranching in the state of New Mexico. We've just got too much land. That is the best use of that land. Will we be doing it like we did in the past? You know, the greatest thing that we have in the state of New Mexico is we have a lot of good customs and culture, and we respect the cultures of the past. But you look at every producer that's out there today, and none of them are doing it like their grandfathers did or their great grandfathers did. Everybody adds their own flavor to their culture, and I think that's going to continue in the future. You're going to see an adaptation of technologies that we didn't even think about yesterday in tomorrow's agriculture. You're going to see the uses of water change and the dynamics and the opportunities for, and I'm not even sure what it's going to be because some of this stuff hasn't even been invented yet. And I think those are the opportunities of the future. And the next generation and the generation after that will adapt. They'll produce that food. I think for our consumers, COVID showed us one thing. We love local food, and it was available. And the challenge that we had is connecting the producers to the consumers. And we've got to all do a better job of that. The consumers needed to look for those opportunities to buy the local and to support their farmers and ranchers.
Secretary Witte, thank you so much for talking with me.
Glad to be here.
With just a few weeks to go before one of the state's most high-profile events, we now know the International Balloon Fiesta will not have a vaccine requirement. The announcement came earlier this week after organizers indicated they were still considering this extra public health precaution. Tom, the Garrity Group has, of course, worked with the Balloon Fiesta for years now. What was the deciding factor in this decision to forego a vaccine or a negative test requirement for entry?
You know, it was a decision that the board of directors made actually in August, and the announcement was made in early September. It recently, got some traction when a government entity said that it's still on the table, when in actuality, the Balloon Fiesta, which is a private 501c3 organization, had already made that decision early on. So, what we saw was just a reinforcement of the, masks are mandated in indoor spaces and in crowded outdoor spaces, which aligns both with the state's public health order as well as CDC guidelines.
Got to stay with you, Tom, on this one. Who monitors these kind of things? If we're going to have to be outdoors, some parts of the balloon field are shoulder to shoulder. We're going to have masks, but who taps who on the shoulder and says you got to have a mask on out there?
It's we're relying on our guests to be that self-enforcer. Everybody has a certain level of comfort. The launch field itself is 83 acres. We're going to have special shapes, or Balloon Fiesta is going to have special shapes spread throughout, because we know that that's an area where people tend to congregate. So there are a lot of different things that Balloon Fiesta has done to make it, a lot more, visitor friendly from the perspective of increased hand sanitizers, cashless systems as well being available, and even moving all of our indoor seating for eating outdoors. So there's a lot of different things that Fiesta has done behind the scenes, and they've been doing it and working on this for the last 18 months, ever since March of 2020. And just as a very quick side note, when the restrictions were the strongest for Balloon Fiesta was looking at a number of different ways to address this particular issue, came up with a number of different contingency plans. And even when the restrictions from the state were the strongest, Balloon Fiesta devised plans and approaches where they could still have the event under those current health restrictions. So there's been a lot of thoughtful process that's gone into, how these policies and approaches have been developed.
Serge, a spokesperson for the governor told KOB they were disappointed with the lack of a vaccine requirement. So my question to you is, as Tom mentioned, is following CDC guidelines, which Fiesta is doing, not enough? Or do organizers have a responsibility to hold a higher standard? Or to follow the governor's wishes? What's the best route here?
I don't think there's any obligation to follow the governor's wishes, but I think that this clearly reflects a decision that's based not just on public health, right? This is saying, who do we want to have coming to the Balloon Fiesta, and who do we not care about them staying away? People who are concerned about this are going to stay away, and people who are less concerned are going to be coming. And it's not only that big 83-acre field that Tom was talking about. There's buses to get you there. There's lines waiting for the buses. There's, it's going to be not possible to say at all times, oh, we're not spending too much time close to each other. And the vaccines, I realize, are not perfect, and all of the caveats, but it does clearly reflect a choice that this is, we're going to try to maximize the number of people who come, right? And, looking at what happened with the state fair, all the criticism and the controversy around the vaccine requirement, and the organizers say it was a huge success and they never had any trouble with the vaccines. I'll have to, I'll take them at their word for now. But I can understand there's lots of pressures here, but I do think that it's not 100% consistent with what I would think would be the best practices for public health. And that's a choice that was made.
Martha, I got to run back to the spokesperson for the governor's office weighing in on this. Was a line crossed here? I mean, Tom mentioned that this is a private entity. Is the governor's office, should they have said anything about this?
Well, I think they should have, yes. I was very disappointed that, if the state fair can do it, and successfully so by and large, why
Well, their numbers were down at the state fair. Yeah,
Well, they did
yeah.
go down, went down for a reason because people who are not vaccinated are depending on the rest of us to keep them safe, which is pretty stupid in my view. But in terms of who comes to the Balloon Fest, of course it's international.
Right.
But we looked at the numbers for our bordering states who will send a lot of folks. We're 70% vaccinated. Texas is at 50%, barely. Colorado is a little better, but still below 60. Oklahoma, our other border state, is way down at 46%. And Arizona is at 50%. So we're going to have a lot of folks coming into the state just from our border that are not vaccinated. And I think it's a note of caution. You say that fair numbers were down. Balloon Fest numbers might be down for the opposite reason, because vaccines are not required. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Martha, I got to ask, is this decision going to pave the way for other events to now forego a vaccine requirement? Are there any tangential impacts from this decision, do you think?
I think there probably will be. It depends on how our numbers look, and they're looking very good right now. But I'm worried that we'll have a false sense of security. And more venues will open up and say, well, we're on the downside now. We did that before, and look what happened.
Good point.
I'm not way back up.
That's a fair point. Tom, I got to ask you, anecdotally, did you get feedback from the community that whichever way you went with a vaccine requirement, some people would just not attend? You know, what was part of that decision process?
Yeah, we definitely, to answer your question, we have received a lot of feedback from both sides. Folks who think that it's not enough and others who think it's too much. So there's definitely, people are not shy on this particular topic. With respect to, other events that have already been taking place, I think and I hope that what people will see at Balloon Fiesta is a bit more stepped up than what we're seeing at various concert venues that are being held throughout the, concerts that are held in the Albuquerque area, different football stadiums, which are also outdoor events. So, I think that, when it comes to, how Balloon Fiesta is approaching it, I think that they're doing the best and making the best possible decisions, for the event, but more importantly for their guests, because for the guests and pilots, Balloon Fiesta has a vested interest to make sure those who come in 2021 return in 2022 for the 50th.
Just a quick note here, APD, as I'm reading it in the Journal, has outlined a security plan for the grounds. They'll have uniformed folks, plainclothed, and horseback officers patrolling. That's kind of interesting. Serge, the question is about ballooning, not Balloon Fiesta. But I have to mention the developments this week in the June balloon crash that killed the Montoya and the Martinez families. A toxicology report shows that the pilot, Nick Molesky, had cocaine and marijuana in his system. We've all seen balloons in the sky since then, but does this news mean anything about the ballooning culture?
Gene, I am not a balloonist. I don't know much about the ballooning culture and whether getting high is figuratively part of that as well as literally.
I didn't even see that coming.
That's how good I am. It just came to me. But it's obviously troubling operating any sort of vehicle, and I think it's easy to think, oh, balloons, maybe aren't quite as much a concern. But
I guess my question is about doubt. You know what I mean? You want to feel safe when you're going up in the air with somebody. And again, this is one person. I'm not saying this is the entire. When I say balloon culture, don't get me wrong here. But again, on that angle of doubt, what's the impact here?
It's the same, I think, level that I would apply to just about any other activity. I put my life in other people's hands every day when I, drive to work or take a bus or fly a plane or whatnot. And I am trusting in my own ability to sort of hopefully suss out those things and also to be, look out for myself. I'm not a huge fan of being in a little basket suspended above the ground, even theoretically, so I might not be the right person to ask, but it hasn't made me more excited to do it. But I know a lot of people still love it, and it's just not going to deter them.
Let me ask Tom something real quick on this as well. Scott Appleman, I know you know him from Rainbow Riders, had a couple of interesting points in the Journal this week about this. He suspected the weather was too good for this kind of crash. And second, that talk of more flight and pilot regulations after a Texas crash 5 years ago that basically came to nothing. Is it time to revisit that kind of thing now?
Well, I think what we all need to do is just kind of wait and see what the NTSB findings are as a result of the balloon accident in Albuquerque. I know that there are a lot of restrictions that Balloon Fiesta takes. As far as it is an invitational event, pilots have to go through a number of different reviews in order to be considered to fly for Balloon Fiesta. And so, there's, are there things that could be improved in any process? Absolutely. Does it mean that there's a need for additional regulation? That's for the lawmakers. I know that balloonists, should not be painted by the brush that is being painted with this particular situation.
Good point there to finish. Let us know what you think about Balloon Fiesta's decision to not require proof of vaccination at this year's event. You can do that on any of our social media channels. That would be Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. As you heard during our redistricting discussion, the Citizen Committee's October 15th meeting gives you plenty of time to get your thoughts and ideas noted for maps and districts that suit your particular circumstance. I have to say I came away from my midweek Facebook Live discussion with folks from the Citizens Redistricting Committee something near encouraged. We make a lot of getting the voice and will of the people who vote into policy and action, and in my opinion, the effort by the Citizen Redistricting Committee to date clearly has met the standard. Now yes, map making is a bit geeky, but it couldn't be easier, as Serge pointed out earlier. Now, if map making isn't your thing, I would encourage you to go to the website and simply voice your opinion. Remember, the chance to literally redraw your political universe only comes around once every 10 years. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.